He will wreck our religion. He's not here to enforce the rules. Jesus didn't come and live on planet Earth among us, die the death of a criminal, though he was sinless, raised from the dead 3 days later to start a religion. He started a movement, and he gave the great commission to go and make disciples, be disciples who make disciples, who train disciples, who make disciples. This is a movement, not a religion. He was tearing down the structure they created. Here's the error that religious people make. They take God's word, the what, but they remove his heart from it, the why. And they go, just do it. Why do we do it? Because you have to do it. Well, what's the point? Don't ask what, just do this. It's compliance, it's procedure. How do you know if you're a religious person? Well, let's look at what he did and we'll answer the questions for ourselves. He had duty over dedication. Do I do what I do because I feel like I have to? Or do I do it because I want to? She didn't need to be there. She wanted to be there. And she went through the effort, the hard effort to get there because it's what she wanted to do. He was a leader in the synagogue who was very concerned about the rules. He was there out of duty. Is this a program that we're doing, or do I see following Christ and answering the invitation to come a privilege? Is it a privilege to even be invited to be included, or do I go, here's God's program, just start checking the boxes? It's compliance over compassion. He showed zero compassion for the woman because it didn't comply. He wanted the rules to be followed, and following the rules is the highest priority. It was more important than helping another person who desperately needed help. It's compliance over compassion. It's procedures over people. It's when our policies take priority over people. 18 years of this woman's suffering didn't matter to this guy. The policy is that this doesn't happen on this day. Sorry. Should have been here yesterday. Come back tomorrow. It was procedure over people. Ultimately, what they've done, and Jesus was shaking the foundations of their religious establishment. This is why they killed him. He will wreck our religion because he's not here to enforce the rules. Jesus didn't come and live on planet Earth among us, die the death of a criminal, though he was sinless, raised from the dead 3 days later to start a religion. He started a movement. He trained 12 guys to go and do this with other people and train them to do it with other people. And he gave the great commission to go and make disciples, be disciples who make disciples, who train disciples, who make disciples. This is a movement, not a religion. He was tearing down the structure they created. Here's the error that religious people make. They take God's word, the what, but they remove his heart from it, the why. And they go, just do it. Why do we do it? Because you have to do it. Well, what's the point? Don't ask what, just do this. It's compliance, it's procedure. But if we go back and look at this, including the Sabbath law, what was God's heart behind this? Why would he ask them? Why would he tell them to do this? Why did he tell them to do anything? Why did he give them the law? So that they could lord it over people? So they could create a burden? So they could stop a healing because it's the wrong day? So they didn't have to show compassion? No, he's doing it so that his people would be identified, that they would live differently because of the relationship that he had with them. Because he was faithful to them despite their unfaithfulness to him. He still chose them. And their relationship with him was as up and down as yours and I are. And one of the four pillars of Jewish identity is keeping the Sabbath. When they were in captivity in Egypt, they could stop the other thing. Another pillar is their diet. God gave them a specific diet, things they could eat, things they couldn't eat, how to prepare foods. But in captivity, that could be taken away from them. They might not have the ability to keep God's law because of the oppression they were under. But one thing that oppression it could not take away from them was their ability to remember the Sabbath. No matter what was happening, they could still take that day to remember God and his goodness. It wasn't to stop people from doing things. It wasn't because God's like, listen, I'm God, I'm the creator, you're the creation. On this day, you put the brakes to all of it because I'm in charge, that's why. No, he gave us the example on the seventh day of the creation story. He rested. He says, stop, pause for a day. In the busyness of all that you have going on, just one day, just focus on me. Remember, gather and worship. Talk about the good things that I've done. Don't miss it. Don't get distracted. Help each other stay on course. But just one day. And they took his heart out of that and just said, no, this is the procedure and this is the policy. And that's what religious people do. Jesus wasn't condemning him. He called him a hypocrite. He said, you're a fake. You're phony. You're an actor. You're playing a part. That's not you. We saw the real you come out in your words. But the part you're playing, you're a fraud. Because you untie your ox or your donkey and take them to water on the Sabbath, so you care about their well-being. They might be thirsty, get dehydrated. But that's not work. But me putting a hand on a woman who's disabled and her standing up straight and being freed from an evil spirit, in your view, that's work? So your donkey and your ox are more important, more valuable than her? She's a child of Abraham. She's one of you. She's Jewish. And you prioritize farm animals over another human being, one of God's children? You're a hypocrite. You bend the rules to fit what you want. That was never the intention. This was never about keeping the rules. This was about establishing and maintaining, growing, strengthening a relationship. This is about God making himself known to us so that we would know him, so that we would love him more. And when they struggled with this, because ultimately what Jesus is telling the Jewish leaders through his whole ministry, that they were building this establishment based on the law that they tweaked and added to. He said, you're missing this. You're putting the law above love. But he says, the law is love. He tells them this in Matthew 22. He says, when the Pharisees heard that he silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. And one of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question. Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? And Jesus replied, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And a second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. And what are the commandments to do? Love. They took love and said, that's not as important as the law. And Jesus said, no, love is the law. Do you understand that? That God gave you this because he loves you. And you will do this because you love him. That's the motivation. We don't come to church, we don't gather on a Sunday so that we look good. We come and we gather and we worship because he's good. And we've experienced his love and we don't deserve it. And while we were still his enemies, he sent Jesus to die in our place and to be reconciled to him. He didn't wait for us. Just like this woman, he initiated all of it. Jesus saw her. Jesus talked to her. Jesus called her. Jesus touched her. Jesus freed her. She asked for nothing. She was expecting nothing. She did nothing to get his attention. It was all him. You and I are dead people, born dead spiritually. And God says, I'm going to send my son, and I'm going to stir your soul. And I want you to see how much you're loved, even in the unlovely state you are. And my process is I'm going to see you, I'm going to recognize you, I'm going to speak to you, I'm going to call you. And if you respond to the invitation, you will feel the touch of Christ and you will experience freedom. And it will change not only this life, but your eternity.